What's going on, guys? My name is Ken DeCost. I don't like the way I started that. As you can see, we are back again in the shop this week. We are going to touch base on a couple projects that we talked about last week, as well as introduce you to some new projects that, one, we have just wrapped up, and two, that are about to get started. So let's dive right in. If you guys caught site visit yesterday, Nick walked you through our Beacon Hill project, and he showed you this area where a window bench was going to go. Well, here's that window bench. Basically what we did here is we made just 3 cabinets, and in a minute here we'll take the top off so you can actually get a look at the cabinet structure underneath the top. But basically it's 3 cabinets. So on either side we have 2 cabinets that are actually angled, and inside there will be an angled drawer. Now the middle cabinet is just a square drawer. We wanted to maximize the space that we can use within here, and the middle drawer is going to be about 30 inches deep, while the 2 sides, like I said, they're going to be cut at an angle. So we'll have a 24-inch slide on one side and an 18-inch slide on the other. So this unit is going in the living room. So from this living room, if you were to sit on this bench, you'd be able to see the kitchen just off to your side. And then in just the next room is the master bedroom, where we had built a dresser. So this bench kind of pulls a little bit of inspiration from both the dresser and the kitchen. So since we're going to be seeing it from the kitchen, we matched all of our doors, the rails and stiles, to the kitchen, but we pulled some elements from that dresser, such as the cove molding and the bead molding down below. We wanted to make sure we were keeping all of our parts here on the face symmetrical. So our standard rail and stile size is 2.5 inches. So we have our 2.5-inch stile, and then we have a 2.5-inch filler, followed by what's going to be a 2.5-inch gap here. Our filler piece is cut a little bit wide, so once we do get on site, we can actually scribe our filler to fit, giving us a 2.5-inch space here. You'll also notice that the filler is stepped back about 5 inches from the face. This is going to allow us to have a little bit of separation between the adjacent wall and where our bench starts, giving it almost a more furniture type of feel to it. And so it's not so kind of bulky in that space, and it is a little bit lighter feeling. We'll just stand it up and lean it up right there. So as you can see, the back of these 2 end side cabinets do have a slight angle to them. This is to allow that unit to fit within the angled walls. You'll also notice that the depth of our cabinets isn't quite as deep as our countertop. What we're actually going to have to do here is build a small knee wall behind the unit to allow this, entire bench unit to get secured to a wall. You may be asking what all these random strips of wood are. They're actually called sleepers, and what they do is just basically fill the void between the height of our molding piece here and the back of the cabinet so that the countertop is fully supported. We can pop off these doors real quick just to kind of give you a quick look at the interior of these cabinets. They are going to be drawers, but with just our pre-finished walnut on the inside, and we'll have some nice walnut drawers to go with it. Now we can move on to a project that we did show you last week, but at that time there really wasn't a lot to show you. It was basically 1 lower cabinet and a countertop. So this week we have it all, just about all, assembled. There's a few pieces that are still missing. We still have to attach the crown, and the cabinet that goes behind here is still over at the finisher. So everything is just temporarily set up, so I can't open any of these doors and actually show you the interiors of this space. So this is going to be a coffee bar that is in a master bedroom. So on one section over here, we're actually going to have a sink. Above the sink, there's going to be some adjustable shelving. And if you remember from last week's episode, we stepped that shelving back a little bit to give you a little bit of working area. But these 2 doors are on a bifold track, so they will open up and pivot over this way, giving you a ton of space in here to work and make your coffee. Behind the hinge side, we're actually going to have an angled LED light strip. So that will wash that whole interior space with light so you can see what you're doing when you're making a coffee, and will add a little bit of ambiance if you would. These lower doors here are just going to be on a standard hinge, so each one would open up from the center. This side butts to a wall, so we do just have a filler here. But if you come around on the inside, it gives you a sneak peek at that walnut counter and what that's going to look like. That sink is going to be an undermount sink, So once we get that here in our shop, we're gonna go ahead and make the template to route in for that sink, making sure that we have really nice clean lines and even reveals around that sink. As we're going through this piece, you may have noticed all of these little pieces of wood sticking out of this. I've talked about these before. When we're actually laying up our doors like this, we have small little shims that we like to use so we can get our reveals dead on where we want them to be. We opt for a 3/32 reveal. So we basically just mill a bunch of strips and then cut them down so that we can have our size when we're laying out our doors. So that about catches you up to speed with the coffee bar. If we come over here to our table saw and niche, we have a new project that we're starting. There's about 242 pieces, I believe, of white oak stacked up right here. And this is actually going to be an edge grain butcher block style countertop. So the way that the architect spec'd these out, we're actually going to be running these pieces the short way across the island. So that way they're going to come across the island countertop and return back in this nice waterfall style. We basically have about 9 foot 2 inches of solid countertop before the return. So basically we're gonna have about 15 feet worth of glue ups for this island countertop. We're not gonna do it all in one shot. We're gonna have 3 main components to this, right? We have our top and then our 2 legs, but the top is going to be made in sections because it is so long. And actually the top will end up getting returned back as well, as this island countertop does sit taller than a standard height. We're gonna have a bar height counter that backs up to a standard height counter. So we'll have to make up for that 6-inch difference. So the backside of our countertop is going to return back down to fill that void. We do have a lot more pieces here than what we need. Not all the pieces are going to make the cut. You can see here that this one has a knot on there. We're going to avoid these knots as much as we can. Maybe we're able to spin it over and it lives on the bottom. Maybe not, it all depends on its location. But also we're gonna try to get a bit more even tones through the countertops. So some of the darker pieces or lighter pieces may not make the cut. So we always wanna make sure that we're processing extra pieces so we never have to go backwards and make more and try to recreate the same thicknesses and heights, and that it can all be done in one shot. All of the lumber that we bring into our shop is in rough form. So if you take a look, you can actually see that it's not very smooth. It has a lot of mill marks in it from, of course, the mill. And this is just one of the steps in how we process our lumber. That is going to be a long process to dig into. So maybe we can do a future episode on how we're milling and processing our lumber. Drop us a line and let us know if that's something that you guys are interested in seeing how we're doing. As you can see, our pieces are pretty small, so we are processing our rough cut lumber in a different manner than a lot of other shops are doing. So now we can go down the other end of the shop where we're just about to get underway on another project. You may remember in our video last week where we talked about that wardrobe and that really cool gray taboo veneer. I mentioned that the wardrobe panels line up with the cabinets directly below that. This is the entryway cabinet of the house. So we're just getting started on getting those panels glued up. Let's go take a look. The architect had actually spec'd out some laminates, and we don't use laminates here very often. So this is kind of a newer process for us. It's very similar to how we're veneering, just instead of veneer, we're using a laminate product. So this one's actually pretty interesting. It's not your typical laminate product. It is full color throughout the entire thing, so you don't get that dark black line, and it's actually really soft. So it's a hard material, but it's soft to the touch, and it doesn't reflect any light. So it just gives off this really cool gray color. And we're gonna be using this in a couple different areas of the kitchen. Because this is a new process for us, we decided to go ahead and make a few different adhesive samples based off of the laminate manufacturer's recommendations. So we tried contact cement, PVA glue, and a 2-part epoxy. So down here, this was actually the 2-part epoxy. I had high hopes for this product and it didn't work at all. This laminate just peeled right off of our substrate. So we're not gonna use that one. Then next we have the contact cement. This one held great, worked perfectly. And then we have a PVA glue, which did the same. I really tried to peel off the corner. I was eventually able to do that, but it actually peeled off the top layer of our substrate, not the bond between the laminate and our substrate. So it really just came down to the two of these, the PVA glue and the contact cement. The PVA glue is just a little bit easier and less messy to apply. So we're gonna go ahead and use that for our pieces. So this here's our vacuum bag. We do all of our laminate pressing, veneer pressing in this bag. We do a lot of laminated shelving if we're building up. Everything is done here in the bag. So the vacuum pump will suck all of the air out of the bag, giving us nice, even, firm clamping pressure throughout the entire piece. So a little bit earlier today, Ian went ahead and glued up a couple of the pieces that we're going to be laminating. So let's pull those out of the bag and I'll walk you through our process real quick on how we are going to be laminating these. As we're digging through these, you're going to be able to see that we have a couple different layers going on here. What these are is all these pieces of melamine are actually just so that the pieces don't stick together and to kind of give us what we call a cover sheet. Mainly for when we're actually doing veneer work, but we can do it here as well so nothing sticks to the bag. So these are just kind of sacrificial pieces that we cut to size. We actually go ahead and round over all the edges and the corners so that we don't have any sharp points that could puncture the bag. Then here we actually have the glue up for what we're going to be laminating. To get the thickness that we were looking for, we had to glue up a couple different layers of MDF, so that's what these are here. These are now going to be the substrates for our laminated panels. One of the first steps is that we just want to make sure our substrate and our laminates are going to be free from any debris. To apply the adhesive, we're just going to use a cheap paint roller and roll it on. We just need a thin layer on both the laminate or veneer and your substrate as well. So once we get glue on the laminates, we'll move over to the substrate. You want to avoid any kind of large puddles of glue. They might end up drying and causing a bump in your laminate. So make sure that the glue is rolled out evenly. Depending on the type of glue that you use, you might want to try to get this done a little bit faster. Some of these glues can set up pretty quick. This one here does, why did I say it like that? This glue here does have a pretty fair working time, so we don't have to rush to get this particular one done. We'll typically cut our veneer or our laminates a little bit larger than the substrate. That'll allow us to go back and trim it and make sure that when we are gluing these up, we can align them properly just by leaving a little bit of overhang all the way around our piece. If a vacuum bag isn't an option for you in your shop, then using a PVA glue like this probably isn't the way to go. You would want to use a contact cement, which is applied the same exact way. And once you lay your veneer on it, instead of using the vacuum bag, you would go back with a J roller that looks very similar to a paint roller like this. And applying some firm pressure, you basically roll your laminate onto your substrate, pressing it that way. But I find that the vacuum bag is a lot easier if it's possible. It's a little bit less messy, it's a lot more consistent, and in general, the vacuum bag is much more versatile. Now with our final layer of laminate on there, we can go ahead and put on our cover sheet. Again, making sure that that's providing full coverage everywhere. It will help avoid any sharp corners puncturing the bag and provide another layer of evenness to that pressure. Now when we turn the vacuum pump on, we're gonna have a couple seconds to make sure our pieces stay aligned during compression. Another way to help keep it aligned is depending on what material you're using and how large your pieces are, how oversized you made your pieces, you can shoot down with a brad nail or a pin nail to keep your pieces from shifting around, because the vacuum does want to pull your piece a little bit, which is why we're making sure that as it's compressing, we're keeping nice even reveals everywhere so that we do have full coverage and that our pieces aren't shifting inside under the cover. And if you're doing multiple pieces at once, you can even use some just painter's tape to help keep your pieces in place. So that's gonna do it for this week's episode of Revealed. We caught you up with some projects from last week, as well as introduced some new projects, and even gave you guys an inside look on how we're actually going about our laminating or veneering process. So I'm interested to know how you guys are laminating or veneering. If you're using a bag, if you're using a J-roller, or using another method, drop us a line in the comments and let us know. So please hit that subscribe, and we'll catch you guys next week. Thanks. First off, what the are all these pieces? Oh, here's a beautiful piece of poplar. Better save that.
I'm married.
You too busy? You were too busy shooting shit over there, d***ing around about being married and talking.
You didn't see me flexing?
These are white oak. And cleaner and easier to, it doesn't matter. 4-hour laminated.
Oh boy. See that catch?